Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good tavach, a good week. We continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer Tanya. This program is made possible by Rena Lights LLC, and it's in honor and memory of Rabbi Yosef Halevi Weinberg Olav Hashalom, Rabbi Moshe Pinchas HaKohen Katz Olav Hashalom, Rabbi Yael HaKohen Kan Olav Hashalom. It's also in schus and merit of Rav Zev Yecheskel HaKohen and Risha Katz La'erich Yamim V'Shanim Tevis for many long, healthy years. Being that we are also literally about to go into Zman Matan Torah Seinu Shvuos, so we'll begin with a few words about Matan Torah, about Shvuos, and then we'll go and continue where we're up to in Tanya. It's of course always connected. So it's 3,337 years from the year 2448 in the Hebrew calendar, from creation, when the Yidden stood, all the Jewish people stood at Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and received the Aseres HaDibros and the Kol HaTorah Kula, Matan Torah, the most momentous, most powerful event in history. God giving the human race, the Jewish people, His mandate. Chachmoseh v'ritzeinei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the language of Tanya. Ano nafshi ksovis Yehovis, as the Gemara in Shabbos tells us, that Anoichi, Hashem Elokecha, the word Anoichi is a acronym. Ano nafshi ksovis Yehovis. God is saying, I have infused, embedded my soul, nafshi, in these words that I'm giving you now. So Torah is Eisiatam Lechem, as the Medrash says. When we learn Torah, we're not just learning God's instructions, we're actually learning God about God Himself as He invested and placed Himself in Torah and in mitzvahs. As we learned in chapter 23 in Tanya, actually, we learned about that there's no hester upon Him, that in mitzvahs, which are Ivorin the Malka, they are the organs of the King, of God. And Torah, the Torah is one with God. So we learn Torah, and we mekayim the mitzvahs in the Torah. We're actually uniting in a world where we can feel separate, we can feel the divine, it can be concealed, and we don't feel it. We're revealing it by manifesting it through fulfilling what God wants of us and learning His wisdom. We become one with it, as He explained there in chapter 23. And in different parts of Tanya. So all of that comes to teach us the power of Matan Torah. One of the other things about Matan Torah that's so unique is we know that Gemara says, Ashlei nitna haTorah kaimu kol ha'oves kol haTorah ashlei nitna. The patriarchs fulfilled the Torah even before it was given. Different explanations how, but spiritually, but it says they did fulfill. So what was the chiddush of Matan Torah? So in the Lashon of Halacha, mitzvah ve'esa, till Matan Torah, except the mitzvah of Bris Milah, they were not commanded. But by Matan Torah, they were commanded. But it goes deeper than that. The Medrash says that before Matan Torah, there was a gzeira, tarte mashma. A gzeira means a decree, but it also means a schism, like gozar, like a cut, a split, a dissonance. And the Medrash says, Elyenim la yorda lamata, and tachtenim la yalu lamayla. There's a moshel of Bnei Remi and Bnei Surya, interesting, Rome and Syria, that there's like a boundary, that which is above, Ruchnis doesn't come down to Gashmis, and Gashmis doesn't go up to Ruchnis. By Matan Torah, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. Where was God before the Vayered, before He descended? He was there, but He became manifest in a way that we can now transform the physical world and turn it into a spiritual home for God. Not just spiritually, take gold, silver, gold, copper, kesef, zov, necheshes, and all the other materials the Torah enumerates, and from that make v'shachanti b'seichel. The matter and spirit become one, matter and energy become one. So tachtenim elyenim yarda lamata ve'yered, or Moshe Amar alei alahar, Moshe went up. So it became an interface. So it's actually the original E equals MC squared, energy and matter, spirit and matter, is by Matan Torah. In the language again of Nigla, that we can take a gashmizdika object and turn it into a chefza shel kedusha. That was not possible before Matan Torah, which is one of the reasons where Avram says to Elazar, his servant, Simna yatcha tachas yirechi. So cheder is not a tznius thing to do, because it was the only chefza shel kedusha. He wanted him to take an oath. You do an oath on a physical object that's been sanctified. The only object at that point was tachas yirechi, the bris milah. After Matan Torah, we have the power to every physical object can become transformed to a holy, sacred thing. And that's why you can make a dira b'tachtenim, as he explains in chapter 36 in Tanya, that la'osilave will be v'niglik feit Hashem, the entire existence will be saturated and the divine. V'niglik feit Hashem v'ro kol basar yachdav. Ever mikir tizak. The very stones will cry out, all of existence will be completely filled with the divine. Mola is deis Hashem kamayim liyamachasim. Me'enze, says the Alter Rebbe. Kvar hoye leilom me'enze by Matan Torah. Matan Torah indeed affected the whole world. That's why it says, it's tziptzav, no bird was singing. The whole world fell silent. And they came running actually to Bilam. And he said, Hashem is la'amayitna, Hashem yivarach asame v'shalom. Hashem is giving his power, his Torah to the people, to his people. But that was temporary. Then the power of Matan Torah is to transform the entire physical world. Not just become more spiritual, to actually bring that spirituality, bring that divine, and sanctify the material world, and make it a divine home, a divine mikdash. So Matan Torah is as I said, a momentous event, monumental event, an event that changed the entire course of history. That today we can't transform the material world, because you could argue the material world, you have a glass ceiling, how far can you reach? But that's what Chassidus teaches. Now you can transform and make dafka dira b'tachtenim. Where do you make a home? Like the Alter Rebbe explains there in chapter 36, not el misalyenim. Hoyel lehem yeridim me'er panav yizbarach. They're a descent compared to Atzmus, to the highest levels. It's dafka in this world, this material world, where it's a hell and vehesta, like he says, cheshach kafel mechupel, complete darkness. And it's even hostile to the divine, where people cry out, Aniva avsied, me and nothing else. The exact antithesis of the truth, Ened Mavade, that it's only God and nothing else. And dafka there, tachten shein tachten lamatim meno, in a world that cannot be lower than our world, in concealment of the divine, dafka there you make a home, not just a temporary place, a home, where God is completely comfortable. Begoli. That's L'Asad Lovi, that's Mashiach, as the Alter Rebbe continues as he explains chapter 36 and then chapter 37. So what is the lesson that is teaching us? The power that we have. Every one of us, every man, woman, and child, after Matan Torah, we have the power to transform existence. If you think about it, it's a tremendous message. So it's not just we're passing through, we're doing good deeds. We transform the world with every mitzvah we do, like a building block. And when all those building blocks accumulate, then we have the Geula. Ma'aseinu v'avodaseinu, as the Alter Rebbe continues to explain in chapter 37, our actions are building the building blocks of releasing divine energy in this world. The fact that we don't see it, firstly, we look with physical eyes. Secondly, it's like the example Chassidus gives, munach b'kufsa. Imagine a treasure chest that continues to be filled up with the energies. As the Lashon in the Maimorim of the Rebbe Marash, Meisif Eides Batzilis, every mitzvah adds energy, but it's all like in a chest, and we'll be given the key to the chest. And all it needs is to reveal, to erupt, and then you see the change. Now we've seen changes in the world. The world has become a more humanitarian, a more civil place. All that's a result of the millions and billions of good deeds that we've done that have transformed this very physical world. But there's still work cut out for us. On a practical note, when we stood by Matan Torah, it wasn't just then. It's an experience we recreate on Shavuos. The Medrash says that when you stand and listen to that, when you listen to the 10 Commandments on Shavuos, Matan Torah, you're recreating what happened by Matan Torah. Because it's a nice not Torah Loshen Heva. God is constantly giving us the Torah. One-time event, but it's constantly being renewed, and every Shavuos, Matan Torah Senu, we re-embrace this mandate. That's why it became a custom, the Rebbe, in 1980, before Shavuos, suggested, and this has become now more and more popular, that all men, women, and children, even newborns, should be brought to the shul to hear the Aseres HaDibros, just as all the Yidden stood by Matan Torah, and the Medrash says the Torah could not have been given unless everyone was there. Vayichon Sham Yisrael neged ha'har ki'ish echad b'lev echad, united as one. And indeed, Yisrael is the Rosh Hashanah, the acronym Yesh Shishim Ribu Eisis LaTorah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah, corresponding to the 600,000 general souls. So by receiving the Torah, we're recreating the energy that happened then and bringing it into now. So we have the power to actually transform the world in which we live. That's our directive, and to spread that and let people know about it. So number one, to come Shavuos, and the first day when we read the Torah, we read the story of Matan Torah, to encourage people to come to shul. And every other way to embrace Torah and mitzvahs, so direly needed, especially in our challenging times. So that is a short overview of Shavuos and Matan Torah. And every year, it's Highland B'Kedesh, we access Matan Torah Sena on a higher level. And we continue to use this great divine blueprint to transform the very existence in which we live. And with that, let us go over to Tanya now. We're in the middle of chapter 25. Some of the themes I just described about Matan Torah are actually here. In general terms, he doesn't talk about Matan Torah per se. And essentially what we're learning here is a summation of all the chapters, basically starting from chapter 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and now we're in 25, where he's tying it all together and saying, as he begins in the beginning of the chapter, that this will understand everything we've learned, because every Jew has an Ava Misoteres, an inherent love within them, and it's just concealed by the Ruach Shtus, that moment of insanity. So that's why, as he says, this is the very central theme of Tanya, as the Alter Rebbe says in the Sharblat, in the cover page, to explain well the pasuk Karev Elecha Dover Me'esh B'chol Eis B'chol Shah. Every given moment, B'yodei Shel Adam U'B'Reshusehu, he has the ability and the capacity L'havi Ruach Shtus, to remove the Ruach Shtus V'Ashricha and the concealment and the forgetfulness it creates, and serve God and connect with Hashem Echad, both in Sur Merah, as he explained, because everything you do that is not what God wants is essentially abandoning God. It's a form of Avodah Zarah. And also Asay Tev, same thing with Asay Tev, like we learned in the last class, the expression was, same thing in Asay Tev. Heim B'chinas Asay Tev, Lizgaber Kari, to strengthen yourself like a lion, and he gave a bunch of examples of how we do that. Now the key thing to keep in mind is not just saying to do Torah mitzvahs, because here we're going deeper than that. We're talking about a love for God. So it's not just to do, to be Yetzir. And this is also deeper of what when we avoid transgression, the Asur Marah that he spoke about. Why? Because when there's a profound love for something, you're going to go out of the way. And you're going to do it quickly, you're going to do it with alacrity, you're going to do it with intensity. And that's all the examples that the Alter Rebbe said, to go over quickly, to strengthen yourself. To be strong like a lion, with strength and determination of the heart. Neged Yetzer HaMachbid is gufu mapel of Atzlus, or Atzla, I should say, against the impulse of the evil side that causes your body to feel heavy and makes you lazy. I'm just going over what we learned, just summing it up, which stems from the animal soul's element of earth, like he explained in chapter 1. And what does this laziness and slothfulness do? It holds you back from pushing your body enthusiastically with the different forms of exertion necessary. V'avedus masa, the strainful work. V'avedus Hashem, sheyesh ba terech v'amal, the serving God, which requires exertion and drive. So what does a person do? How does a person conjure up? How does a person elicit such passion? only when he knows how much it's connected, he's in love with and connected to God through it. That's what drives him. So it's not just, okay, God said, I'm doing it. Much deeper than that. It's being driven by this dormant and powerful love that has now been awakened, that you don't want to be 1 second separated, and you want to be constantly in connection with the thing you love, the reality of a God's existence. And he gives examples. Kagoin lamol b'teira bi'iyun, being driven in teira stavi in depth. Ubepel pasuk pum megirsa, and verbalizing so your mouth doesn't stop studying. So you see this incessant, this intense. Ukamayim razal le'elim yasim adam atzmei al divrei teira kasher le'el ukachamei lemasei. As the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Hey Beis 5b says, a person should always place upon himself the work of studying Torah as he accepts the yoke, as an ox accepts the yoke, I should say, and as a donkey, its burden. So all this, you see this intensity, all coming from, that's the Kodev Elocha Dover made. Because it's so much the real reality who we are, and when you recognize that, that's what pushes a person. I skipped the line, sorry. Same thing with tefillah, intentional prayer, mindful prayer, with your full power of attention. You have your Torah Vedic Mils Chasadim, learning Torah with that intensity, like he said. Now tefillah, he spoke about, and now he's speaking about Avedis Hazdaka, Gmils Chasadim, when serving God in your financial matters, such as the worship through charity, like Avedis Hazdaka, the service of charity. So we have to stretch ourselves and push ourselves to the utmost of our abilities. And then he continues, says the Alter Rebbe, and so too, in other areas of the war that we're fighting, against the impulse and its tactics, the impulse of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the animal soul and its tactics, because it's making an effort to cool off a person, dampens the soul, that he shouldn't, convincing him not to squander your money on charity. Why should you give money to others? And the same thing, why squander your body's well-being, ubriyas gufei, by doing it through Aveda. Shalamed negdei ulichbesh karev me'ed ala adam. All this, the Ava Mesuteres, that he's accessing, is all coming to stand strong against this impulse of evil. Ulikovshay, first to stand up against it, to overcome it, to conquer it. Karev me'ed ala adam. It's all very much within reach of the person. Kishiyasim alibay, when he takes the heart, to succeed against his impulse to evil. Not just to get against the impulse. To do the exact opposite of what the Yetzer Hara wants. So it's one thing just refraining. Here doing the exact opposite. When a person contemplates on that and takes it to heart, that's much easier than the torture of death for someone who may be challenged with Avodah Zarah, like we learned earlier. Yisuri misa yishmereni, misa Hashem yishmereni. I think I skipped a line. Lasa fochim mamish, to do exact opposite. Kal ma'id misuri misa Hashem. Hashem yishmereni. That's easier than the torture of death that a person is ready to do due to his nefesh alikis avim esoteris, not to bow to an idol. Yisuri misa Hashem yishmerenu hayu mekabel ba'ava b'rotzen shlo lepod miyachud v'aduch seis baruch. as we learned earlier, that a person would accept the torture of death, may God spare us, afil lefisha, he would do so lovingly and willingly, so as not to be separated from God's unity, even for a moment. Lishtachvis laved zara, through bowing to idolatry, chas v'shalom, God forbid. As we learned earlier. And now we've discovered that every Aveda is separating and every mitzvah is connecting. So if he's ready to do it, even to die for it, how much more so to live for it? So all the more so that he does it lovingly and willingly, accepting this difficult part of exertion, the effort that we've been talking about, to be connected with the God, le'elam vod, and forever. So he's tying together, as you see, that which we learned earlier about even ready to die for something in a case when push comes to shove, an emergency. Now we're applying it when a person realizes that every little good deed and every negative is all essentially defying God's unity. So if you're ready to die for it, here we're only asking you for refraining, like he said earlier. It's only to refrain from the taivas, from the temptations. And in this case, he's talking not to refrain, but to do the mitzvahs with exertion, with an effort. So though the Yetzer Hara is trying to encourage him to be lazy and not, but he's overcoming that. And he continues, since when he carries out God's will in this work, in this effort that we're talking about, the innermost divine will is revealed in your actions, because that's what it's doing. It's revealing this divine unity and the reality of the divine in a way that God's face shines and is abundantly disclosed without any concealment at all, like we learned earlier. And when the divine will is shining without anything covering it, then nothing can be separate in any way from God to feel itself as an isolated, independent identity. So that's what's happening here. You're connecting to what is true reality, and nothing can separate. As we learned back in Perek Chav Gimel, what a mitzvah and what Torah does in this context. Ulezeis tiyena nafshei alikis. And now he continues. And therefore, when a person does indeed a mitzvah, his divine soul which is energizing the animal soul and their garments, kulan miyuchades betachlis hayichud beratzon elyon ve'erein seiv baruch hu. They're all merged in a total seamless union with the divine will and the infinite light of God, keniska li'il, as mentioned above in chapter 23. So we see here how Torah mitzvahs is so intricately bound with God, because God is embedded in his mitzvahs, embedded in his Torah, as we learned there. So then when a person embraces that, he's experiencing this utter unity. So what you see here is the Alter Rebbe is taking the concept we learned about with all its philosophical foundations, and now he's applying it to what it means in actual Aveda, practical Aveda. But he's going to go back now to a point he was making earlier about time. Because remember, on one hand, God is above time, like he said before, that everything is he said the Bible. Let's just see the lashon that he used. And he said there, because, give me a minute, for the exact lashon. Because at the end of the day, the fact is that tzimtzumim that conceal the divine also make a distinction between moments. Something that lasts, something that's temporary. But the truth is that when you get to this point of connection, it's always above time and it's always there. But can we experience this eternity? So he continues now and says, "V'yichud zeh l'mayla hu nitzchi le'levod." And above, in the upper worlds, this merging with the infinite light of God is eternal forever. Because God in His will transcend time, and you're bringing it now into time. And that's what he wants to say, that when we do it, in truth, we're actually drawing down something eternal. And so too, when he reveals God's Ratzon in Torah through his speech, and the Torah is eternal, as the verse states, and the word of God will stand forever. This is in Yeshaya Memches 48. And his words are living and enduring. He'll never offer or change his law. That's how it's all eternal. So that's the connection we make. But he's going to say, but however, below in this world, when you observe a mitzvah, then it's subject to time. And it's this connection, this merging takes place only at the time you're involved with Torah or doing a mitzvah. Because when you do some other activity, afterwards, your merging is interrupted below. So above, there always remains eternal without stop. But below, it can cease in a revealed way. And yet, he's going to continue to explain a person can do tshuva and reconnect. But that will leave for the next program. This has been Tanya Applied. You go to tanyaapplied.com. You can find this and all previous programs. Agutta Vach and the Lashon of the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe. Kabbalah Satera B'Simcha B'Pnimius. It should be a Torah, Nesna Torah, Lashon Heva. And Kol Yem Yeh B'Necha Chadoshim, bringing it down, reliving it every time like anew, and we should experience renewal, and straight from Matan Torah march into the Gula Amitis Vashlei with Torah Chadoshim Iti Teitzei, the fulfillment that says in Medrash, Matan Torah was the Edison, and Lassid Lova will be the Nesuyin, the total union that we're learning about between God and the Jewish people, that began by Yom Chasanosei Zeh Matan Torah. Freilich and Yontif, Kabbalah Satera B'Simcha B'Pnimius.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied, with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit chasidusapplied.com for archived classes and more resources.